promise that the AFCFTA agreement has for the people of this continent. And talking about resources, I read some reports from Financial Times and saying that Africa is not part of the global economy. And I think that that is the biggest fallacy. It is the wrong narrative. We drive the global economy. And the reason why I say we drive the global economy is that today, if we stop our raw materials from leaving our coasts, the global economy will grind to a halt. Because industrialization in the world is driven by resources from Africa. It is driven by the minerals that are leaving our continent, driven by agricultural resources that are leaving our continent, the cocoa, the coffee, the tea. That is what is driving industrialization in the rest of the world. But to say that Africa is not part of the global economy, that Africa is part of the global economic problem, is, in my view, a fallacy. Because it is us, it is our resources that are driving growth. Our resources drove growth in Europe, our resources drove growth in the US, our resources have driven growth in China, because that is what drives. That's why the copper, the coltan, the cobalts, the tin, the manganese, the bauxite, the iron ore that leaves our coasts, is that drives industrialization for the rest of the world. What we are now saying when we come to Africa Prosperity Dialogues is that we would like to use our resources to drive industrial development in Africa, to drive job creation, and to drive the prosperity of the continent. And as I have said, this year,
yeah, guys, I hope everyone is doing well. Yes, on a more serious note, in December 2023, there was an article which appeared in the Financial Times, and in that article, a gentleman who's of Indian extract, of course, mentioned, which is an article that the Secretary General, the person who was speaking was the Secretary General of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. He's a very good man. I've met him when we are trying to advance the railway project that we are working on behalf of the continent. So the Secretary General of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, who's Mr. Silva Ojako, what he was responding to, it was this particular article, and he did this response in about 15th, on the 15th of January. This is when this particular live stream was made on YouTube, and that is when there was a summit, some sort of summit, or it's called the Africa Prosperity Dialogue 2014, which is a meeting that brought together some of the people who, of course, call themselves prominent Africans on the African continent, to deliberate on the future of the continent and how we should talk about adding value to its minerals. Africa, it should add value to its minerals. So that is when this happened, January 2024. Now, the Secretary General, the Chief of Staff to the Secretary General, was responding to this particular article by this gentleman, this Indian gentleman called Rachil Sharma. This Indian is from the United States, and I don't know what, there's something which I've really noticed about certain people who are immigrants to the United States. There is some sort of work very hard to be accepted into the United States, to the point that they come out as the ones who they come out as the ones who love the United States very much. So in this love, of the United States, which they want to demonstrate, they do it to the extent that they crucify majority of the people across the world, whether it is Kissinger. People like Kissinger was not born in the United States, but you can see that he committed so much atrocities, so many atrocities in the United States against, basing in the United States as the Secretary of State of the country, to the point that he killed so many people across the world. So this is what I see with this gentleman also, who works with he works with the Rockefeller Foundation, as we are seeing. Is an author, a fund manager, and a columnist for the columnist. He's a columnist for the Financial Times. He is the head of the Rockefeller Capital Management, his international business, as was an emerging markets investor at Morgan Stanley. So he's deep. This guy's feet are dipped into the well, the well of capitalism. Okay? His feet are very deep within capitalism, within the river of capitalism, if you may like. So he came out and wrote this article, and he said that Africa is the world's problem. The world's economy. The world's economy's biggest problem is Africa. This is what he suggested. And in his thesis, he is saying that because Africa constitutes about 18% of global population, which is true, it is contributing only 3%. Okay, it is contributing only 3% to global productivity. And when we talk about global productivity, of course, we are talking about the GDP, the global economy, because the global economy is around $105 trillion, right? Africa has about $3.5 trillion of that, even though our population is about 18% of global population. So which means that, and I've spoken about this briefly, this means that we are producing 6 times below our capacity. Okay, and of course this goes on to show you that our heads of state are doing the wrong things. And I've repeatedly mentioned this, that the African heads are doing completely wrong things. The direction they are going in is completely wrong. We have seen the South African government, which has thought that forming a government of national unity with the whites in them is what will bring investors to South Africa. But even with that formation of a government of national unity, South Africa is talking about a growth of 1% as a very optimistic figure. Okay, 1% is targeting 1%. So the South African economy, what it needs is not the leftover investment. We have spoken about high value investment on this channel, that Africa has found itself in most of the times getting the leftover investments on the global stage, and yet these guys is what they're calling investment. They are going out there to ask for investment. The high value investment is going to organize the places like China, is going to organize the places like India, and is going to imperialist places which are fighting for them. Even Europe is begging for investment. Okay, but of course Europe currently has its own problems when it comes to energy. So the industries, even some of there's a chemical manufacturing giant which left even Germany and established a $10 billion factory in China, right? So they are looking for organized markets. Now, this leaves African countries in a position where they are going to prostitute themselves to the global capitalists. And Nkrumah, of course, saw this, that African countries, if they don't unify, the only solution they're going to be left with is to prostitute themselves with the global capitalists and to be abused there. As you know, that prostitutes are always abused, whether they are, male prostitutes, whether they are female prostitutes, they will always be abused. And that's what it is. And they eat leftovers. All right? Prostitutes eat leftovers. So that is what is happening. And all this is to show you that the failure to unify the continent and make it attractive so that you can attract high value investments will leave you eating the crumbs, even when it comes to investment. So this is what has left the African economy in the position it is today. Countries even like South Africa, they are still struggling with energy problems, which we have said that the only way currently to solve Africa's problem is way beyond, is beyond, the way is beyond now the small states on the African continent. The major fundamental problem, the structural problem, the structural sectors that are going to lift Africa's economy to industrialization and mass jobs and even attracting high value investments on the African continent is investment in continental projects. We are going to have to come together and invest in an integrated transport system on the African continent, and that means a railway platform. Okay. Number two, that railway platform, of course, which we have laid the foundation and we have shown even at the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, where I was talking to Mr. Silva Ojako, who is the Chief of Staff of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. I spoke to him and did a presentation for them. So the railway platform, which is a transport network across the African continent, which we have called, of course, the Africa Railway Triangle Network Master Plan, will come with a fiber optic cable, which is a connection, a communication platform. Okay, because what you need about 4 sectors that you need to take care of on a very serious note and on a continental scale to be able to attract investment from outside, high value investment, not just these crumbs which South Africa is going around to attract. Now, if you attract investments that are going to lead, these crumbs which are going to lead to growth of 1%, it means that there's nothing there that you're trying to attract. It's completely useless, right? This is useless because where Africa is right now, we need to post growth of about 7 to 10% for consistent periods of about 20 years as African continent, 20 to 30 years. Why? Because we are already behind, like what this man is saying. This man is saying that Africa is a problem. But of course, unlike him, I'm not saying that it is a problem. I'm not saying Africa is a problem. But we are producing below capacity. There is truth in what he's saying. Okay, and this is the problem, of course, with the imperialists, that they mix the truth, of course, with the lies. And in some cases, they give you half truth. Okay, they present to you half truth to make it look like it is the whole truth. All right, so this is a problem now we have with these imperialists. So he said that Africa is contributing about 3% or less than 3% of global output, which is global economy. All right, which is true. And Africa is contributing about 18% of global population, which is true, which is very true. But now what he doesn't mention is that there's imperialism also holding this continent back, is exploiting. You look at Africa's energy sector, for example, is being dominated by foreigners, Western powers. All right? Africa's energy sector is being dominated by foreign powers. They're the ones dominating Africa's energy sector. So how are we going to grow if our energy sector, which is a driver, which is an engine, because you need about you need about 4 engines if you're talking about growth and industrialization and then creating mass jobs and then rapid growth. You're talking about the energy sector, you're talking about the transportation sector, communication sector, and then you're talking about agriculture. These are the base of any economy. These are the base of any economy. And of course, if you're talking about communication, you're talking about ICT, information technology, and you have to create your own companies, your own multinationals, corporations have to run this. Just like what you see, it is the same thing which is happening in China and the same thing that is happening in the United States. That the companies which are running these sectors belong to that particular country. So you go to South Africa, these people who are running the land, which is where the agriculture comes from, they are foreigners. These are Europeans. All right. And South Africa again is inviting that they should come and invest in their energy sector. They are inviting Europeans, they should come and invest. And the Europeans, they don't have money, worst of all. So you need control over these 4 sectors in order for you to spark industrialization. Then industrialization, of course, is built on these 4 sectors. And then industrialization will create jobs and will create products and jobs which you can trade under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. If you don't have that, then how are you going to trade? What are you going to trade in your Africa Continental Free Trade Area to be realistic in this particular issue that we are talking about? So this guy say that the countries across the continent have been unable to capitalize on their demographic dividend. Of course, he's talking about the population. He's talking about Africa's population. A global baby bust is slowing growth in every major economy from China, Japan, Germany, and the United States. But the flip side of this story goes untold. Even economies that could still get a big boost from population growth are failing to do so. All right. So again, what these imperialists or these petty representatives, these small, wannabe imperialists like him who's writing this Financial Times don't say is that imperialism has played a major role in holding the continent back. That is one thing. They are interfering in the political process of the African continent. Yet the political process is the one which sets the center stage for industrialization. All right? The political process is the one which sets the economic and social agenda of the continent, of any state. That is why things are working in China, and that is why the United States is fighting against the political system in China and abusing and insulting the CPC of China, because the CPC, the Chinese Communist Party, is setting the agenda for China to grow and to continue moving forward, move up the value chain. And this is what I see about South Africa. That South Africa has to move up the value chain of growth. All right, it has to start adding value to its minerals and manufacture these products, the advanced products. But it is not doing, and then it is talking about inviting investment from outside. All right, the energy sector is still having problems. Okay, so the man is saying now that the biggest problem for global growth is Africa. That is what he's saying. Now home to 1.5 billion people. 1 in 3 of those entering the workforce will live in the continent in 2030. For the world economy to grow faster as a whole, Africa would need to find a way to employ these workers productively and capitalize on its demographic dividend. But most of the African countries, that's not happening. My research shows that a rate of growth in the working age population of at least 2% is necessary for miracle economic growth, implying a sustained pace of at least 60%. Of course, he's right, 6% growth. And some of our major economists like Dambisa Moyo, who is an African economist, living in the United States, I think in New York, and she's currently a baroness even in Britain. She has mentioned this, that you need sustained growth over a period of 10 years. Like you need like 7% to 10% for you to double your economy, in 10 years. Every 10 years you double your economy. Every 10 years you double your economy. You need a figure to grow at 7%. And you look at South Africa, they are talking about 1%. They are growing less than 1%. You look at the whole African continent, 3.4%. So you see that the population growth is ahead of, population growth is somehow ahead of or at par with the economic growth. And this doesn't help at all. At least the economic growth should be ahead and should be hugely, at least by 100%, ahead of the population growth. Okay. So 110 countries had a working age population growth that fast, nearly half in Africa. Now, there are just 58 with 41 or more than 2/3 in Africa. So basically it's talking about Africa. Over the past 5 years, only 3 of the 54 African countries have grown at an annual rate of more than 6%: Ethiopia, Benin, and Rwanda. That is down from 12 in 2010s. Not a single African economy has seen a transformative gain in average per capita income, and half have seen a decline, including 3 of the continent's 5 largest economies or largest countries, that is Nigeria, South Africa, and Algeria. And of course what he's saying is that these have declined, and ourselves, of course, we had noticed this. Long time ago we had noticed this, that the African continent is not growing a combined or an average or aggregated growth of 3.4% which is happening today, is not enough. And we are the first people to have said this. And as Africans, we don't even need the Financial Times guy, this Indian guy, to come out and tell us this. We know, and that is why we are saying that the continent has to move in a different direction. The African heads of state are moving completely in the wrong direction. And like Africa Prosperity Dialogue, merely talking about the problems that are affecting the continent is not enough. Talking about that we are going to refine the resources, we are going to add value to our resources, coltan, the world is doing this and that. If we don't do the right thing, if we don't put the correct foundation on the ground, nothing is going to happen on the African continent. It's not going to happen until 1963. Nothing is going to happen on this African continent. So it means that we have to go back to the basics. And we have to understand that what the heads of state are currently doing is not enough. Is not enough. The countries which have been growing on the African continent and those ones which are relatively doing well are insignificant. Their effect is insignificant compared to the majority of the continent. Botswana, which we have mentioned on numerous occasions, Botswana is relatively okay. All right, Ethiopia has been positing about 10%, even reached in some cases it was positing 10% growth. Okay, but Botswana, which is already successful, Ethiopia we cannot count it as already successful because there's still problems there. There's still a lot of work to be done. But the biggest economies on the African continent are not growing as they should. At least they could have been drivers of the growth on the African continent. So the small countries like Botswana, with 5 million people, they are almost insignificant. Their effect is insignificant. It will not be felt on the African continent. Their doing well cannot be felt on the rest of the continent, whether it's Mauritius, whether it is Seychelles. All these, even if they are doing well, or Cape Verde and all these are small countries, to the point that their growth will almost not affect the whole African continent. And this is the problem that we have. And therefore, whatever we do or whatever we are planning, we need to shift direction. Where the continent is going in the wrong direction. Otherwise, we are going to end up with people like this who are writing half-truth across the globe, and they're going to call themselves smart. All right? They are going to call themselves as the most enlightened. Are these immigrants to the United States who are trying to prove that they love the United States very much so that they can stay over there? You know, they are going to be there and putting their legs up and writing all kind of false stuff to try to prove their love for the United States and incriminating or falsely incriminating the African continent. You can see even the picture which he used a very dirty picture. As you know, these are imperialistic platforms that they always want to shame Africa and look at it as a bad place. So that is what, of course, he wanted to achieve even with this article. And like I said, they do not tell you the other side of exploitation. They do not tell you the other side of the interference into Africa's population or political process. They don't tell you, the interference into Africa's political process and holding it back, how imperialism is holding the continent back and stopping it from growing. So this is the challenge, of course, which we are facing. And like we mentioned previously, and we have repeatedly mentioned, the major problem that Africa faces right now is the problem of imperialism. And this is not mentioned, like I said, imperialism and the African heads of state who are helping imperialism to continue to subjugate the continent and its people. These are the major problems that we have to remove. Once we remove these two problems in this generation, then we are going to see growth. If we plan well and focus on the right things, because our heads of state are focusing on completely wrong things, then we are going to move in the direction of growing in the right way as it is, required. Okay, because right now, like we have mentioned, we need to grow like 6 times. We need to grow 6 times our current economy to around $18 trillion for us to be at the level where our productivity is equal to that of our population compared to the globe, which is 1.5 billion people. We need to grow and have an economy of around $18 trillion instead of $3.5 trillion. So we are 6 times producing less than our capacity. We are 6 times producing below our capacity. Okay, so this is a major problem that of course has to be solved if we are gonna survive as a people, and if we are gonna count ourselves as equal to the rest of the world, or equal to the rest of the races of the world, and be respected, of course, by the world. But if we don't do that, then we're not gonna be respected by anyone across the world. No one is gonna respect us. To be honest, no one will ever respect us with that kind of attitude. But what do you think? My name is Kwame Gonza. What do you think? Do you think this man is right to call us the problem of the world? Because he called us, to be honest, he called Africa the problem of the world. Africa is the problem of the global economy. Why? Because we are not growing as we are supposed to grow, and of course, which I mentioned, that is our truth. But what do you think that this man is saying? What do you think about what he's saying? Do you think he's right, or he's completely wrong about what he's saying? Put that in the comment section. My name is Kwame Gonza, and the channel is called Connect Africa and Africa Reimagined. Please, 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 please like the video and share it with other people, and also support us in our PayPal account, and support us also with the super chat. Give us some super chat, you guys who are watching. And support us also on Rumble. Support us on Rumble, because these platforms, as you know, the imperialists are threatening us. They are threatening Pan-Africanism. African Stream was removed from YouTube. So you need to support us. You need to come out there on Rumble, so that you can support us out there, and so that we can continue to serve the African continent and bring out things which matter in our generation. Because I honestly believe that this generation of ours has to rescue the African continent. It has to do something about the situation of the African continent. The continent has been going, the continent has been going in the wrong direction for a very long time. So we have to do something about it in this particular generation. Like Franz Fanon said, every generation must find its mission and fulfill it or betray it. I believe that our generation must find the mission of rebuilding the African continent, and that starts with uprooting imperialism from the African continent and its representatives who are masquerading themselves as president. People like Ruto, people like Nanado, people like Ouattara in Ivory Coast, people like Tinubu. All these elements, we have to find a medicine for them. So when we find medicine for these, wicked elements who are holding the continent back, then we will be able to lift the continent and put it where it is supposed to be within a single generation. It must be done because we have to grow. We have to be respected by the rest of the world. Thank you so much, and my name is Kwame Gonza. And once again, the channel is called Connect Africa and Africa Reimagined. Please support us in all the ways you can. Like I said, on PayPal. Our PayPal is included in the description. And also support us also with the super chats, super stickers. And go out there on Rumble and support us there. Subscribe to our channel on Rumble, so that we can be at least one of those African platforms which are growing very fast on Rumble. There are only very few African platforms or African-centered platforms on Rumble. So go out there and support us so that we can survive even if imperialism attacks us and boots us from its platform called YouTube. Thank you so much, and God bless you all. We'll see you next time.